Chapter 181. Halt the convoy. The mortar teams moved into position, and Dominic jogged to the cliff, revealing himself to the convoy. Halt the convoy. Don't make this difficult when we're feeling peaceable, he shouted. The escorts drew their blades, and Dominic heard the mortar teams complaining about losing the advantage of surprise. But the convoy stopped. Out of the ornate steam-powered transport that the princess had identified as belonging to Viscount Boscombe, a dark-haired man emerged to glare up at Dominic. What is the meaning of this? Are mere border guards turning on their rightful king? He demanded. Viscount Boscombe? Or perhaps King Boscombe now? Dominic asked, confirming his suspicions. That is me. Who are you to stop my convoy? My apologies, Your Majesty. I am Royal Sorcerer Dominic Wavemates of Signia, and I am afraid that your presence will be required for a meeting here before we can allow your convoy to depart back west. Dominic replied. Back to the west? The Viscount asked. Part of what we need to discuss. You see, as of now, everything east of the Skiptondle River is under the control of the Signia Royal Army, or will be within the next few days. Dominic explained. He wasn't sure that it was true, but all the major cities were, and the smaller ones should be soon. They hadn't seen a Dago's airship since they got here. And what if I do not come peacefully? The Viscount asked. I have 500 Magitech light cannons in the gorge. I suspect that you can be persuaded to act reasonably. With that, the front rank of mortars rose to their feet, showing off the brass tubes on their shoulders. The soldiers looked along the lines, knowing that even if they drew their bows now, cannon fire would tear them apart before the arrows even reached the cliffs. Do you even have the authority to negotiate with me? Viscount Boscombe asked. I am a royal advisor, and I have someone here who will more than qualify as a royal negotiator. Dominic agreed. One of the regimental officers ran out a rope ladder to let the Viscount scale the cliff, and Princess Alexis moved to stand next to Dominic, but didn't speak. The Viscount recognized her immediately, even with her hair dyed black, and headed for the cliff with a group of his guard behind him. The regiment moved back, so they wouldn't be taken as a threat to the Viscount, especially if he was already confirmed as the new king of Dagos. Dominic extended his hand to help the nobleman to his feet at the top of the cliff, then his guards as well. Someone brought forward camp chairs, but the Viscount shook his head. We can retire to your camp to discuss. I trust Her Highness not to have me assassinated at this point, he insisted. Alexis shrugged. The Viscount was happily married, and he had never struck her as a creep. There was no harm in letting him sit in the camp as they talked. The princess led them to an empty set of seats around a cooking fire, still burning low from the afternoon meal. Forgive the informality. This setup has proven to be more comfortable than the standard arrangement. First, for the sake of formality, have you officially taken the throne? Princess Alexis asked. Viscount Boscombe shook his head. Not yet. The official transfer of title ceremony was supposed to be in the next week after I led the relief of Pickleshauen. You weren't far off when you said that everything east of the river is controlled by Signia, except for the villages and rural areas, that is. Princess Alexis frowned. Don't you know? There are no villages left. When we passed through, everyone had either starved, been taken by force for the military recruitment, or fled. The villages all the way to that River, over 500 kilometers, are empty. Boscombe didn't look convinced, but his intense scrutiny didn't shake the princess. And what sort of discussion might you have called me up here for? I would assume that you're not going to demand the surrender of Dagos. The Viscount asked. Princess Alexis smiled at him. No, I think that we can come up with something much more amenable than that. Did you know that Signia has Magitech to operate irrigation systems? A large portion of Dagos has fallen to drought even before the war started, but the technology exists to make those fields viable again. It might not be cheap, and Dagos is certainly going to be deep in debt after the war finishes, but if you can stabilize the throne and bring an end to the war, I can guarantee a favorable armistice agreement. Realistically, you've only got 2 months left anyhow. Once the east falls, the airships will begin to firebomb the northern regions of Dagos until there isn't a single farmer or field left in the country to feed the cities. You look like a reasonable man to me, which is why we're willing to let you turn around and take care of business. If it was Prince Kaizan in the carriage, there would not have been a discussion at all. She informed the Viscount, her tone turning dry at the mention of the prince. Viscount Boscombe sighed. That man holds too much influence with the army to easily displace him. But the nobles are turning on him with every day that passes and every city that falls. Deposing the bastard prince who controls the armies will not be a fast process. I long ago stepped away from royal duties in favor of a love marriage into the Viscount Boscombe's family. So long ago now that even some of my own children have been casualties of the war. Dominic nodded in understanding. He had been the one to kill the Viscount's son at the airship docks in Burton. The Viscount got a wistful look on his face, and then addressed Dominic instead of Princess Alexis. It would be uncouth to ask the princess directly, but if I should fail, what is the plan? Dominic smiled. The Viscount should already know, but he wanted someone to tell him again, just to hear the words. If you should fail, and the successor to the throne should be deemed unsuitable, the largest group of nobles in Signia are pushing to have the Crown Prince of Signia and his bride installed as the Queen and Prince Consort of Dagos, annexing the nation and making it a secondary title of the Signia crown when the Crown Prince ascends the throne. Dominic insisted. Princess Alexis was glad that nobody was looking at her at that moment because her shock at his plan would have ruined the ruse. Annexing Dagos? The nation was massive, over twice the land mass, and 4 times the population of Signia. That level of political shift would cause unrest all over the continent. Dominic noticed her unease and smiled at the Viscount. I am sure that it wouldn't go over smoothly, but West Kyria has long been interested in some eastern territories, while Axbridge has shown interest in the Kynwyn province. Even with those sacrifices, Signia would triple in land and population, under one royal family sharing the bloodline of both nations. Chapter 182. Turn back, Your Highness. Viscount Boscombe tilted his head, seriously considering the options. Passing the nation to one of the Signia Crown Prince's sons with a Signia-appointed regent was the solution that I had thought would be most likely, as they are considered imperial princes of both nations by blood. If Dagos considered women to be in the direct line of succession, your Crown Prince's wife would be the Crown Princess already. However, as a loyal son of Dagos and his heirs, neither of those options would be my first choice. I will arrange for the throne to be secured, even if it means that I am not the one to claim it. Dominic nodded. Thank you. But know this. Until you do, we don't have the sway to stop the counterattacks. As much as we would wish for you to succeed, you do have a limited amount of time. The Viscount got to his feet. I should depart now. It will give you time to relocate. Dominic nodded, then shrugged. Or we could stay here and see who still comes down the road, knowing that we're waiting for them. Dominic heard the Dagos guards snort in amusement. The sorcerer had a point. They had hundreds of those Magitech cannons along the ridges, and this was the only major bridge across the river for 50 kilometers. If they relocated, it would actually be doing the Dagos army a favor by clearing the path for reinforcements. But if they stayed and then destroyed the bridge, when they encountered a force they couldn't handle, they could delay reinforcements to Peikelschauen and the other cities in the region by nearly a day. The real question was whether the region could afford the delay. The barons Winchfield and Macker both had their homes north of there, along the ocean. But neither was heavily defended, as they were formerly fishing villages that had been swelled by the sudden influx of migrants from inland. Neither would put up a fight against an airship invasion. The Viscount could only hope that he was fast enough to prevent even more tragedy. The channel between Winchfield and Modbury was only 80 kilometers, nothing for an airship, despite the formidable naval defenses stationed there. Modbury was over 250,000 souls, and not once in the history of Dagos after unification had it been invaded. It was simply too inaccessible to any enemy army. At least until now. Viscount Boscombe looked to the sky as he straightened his coat. If I am successful, I will be infamous as the king who lost more of Dagos than any other in history. If I am not, I will be the man who failed Dagos in her moment of need and let a mad prince tear the country down around him. Perhaps there might have been a chance at redemption if I could have retaken the eastern territories, but not now. He sighed. Dominic clasped his forearm in the traditional wavemates soldier's handshake. We sent more artillery than you brought soldiers, and more riflemen than we brought artillery. Winning was never your destiny. Go, save your country. The Signia crown is honorable. They will stand behind the princess's promise. The Viscount laughed, a real honest laugh, and returned the gesture. To think that one day a notorious war criminal would be shaking my hand and wishing me luck in gaining the throne. I'm not sure how to feel about that. But if your princess keeps her word, I will extend a royal pardon to you, Lord Sorcerer, as her advisor, in exchange for your efforts. However, I don't think that the army will forget about the massacre at Westover Manor quite so easily. Be careful, Lord Sorcerer. You seem like a decent man, all things considered. The Viscount and his advisors climbed back down the ladder, and the riflemen rolled it back up as the Dago's army turned their trucks around in the gorge and returned to wherever they had come from. Most likely, they had come from Albrol City, as it was on the highway between Boscombe and their location, and it was the unofficial capital, as the largest city in Dagos. Once the last of the soldiers crossed the river, Princess Alexis turned to Dominic. We need to hear the story of Westover Manor. That is your hometown, right? I had assumed that they called you a war criminal because you are a Wavemates prince, but it doesn't feel like it's that impersonal. She demanded. In a gentle tone, yes. But it was clearly a demand for answers. Dominic nodded and motioned for the princess and the other nearby officers to take a seat. If I'm going to tell the whole story, you might as well all hear it clearly instead of eavesdropping. I will warn you that there are gaps in my memory, but there are also a few things that I should show you first, so that it all makes sense. Dominic paused, and then focused on the rage. He felt the moment that he realized the Dago soldiers had slaughtered everyone in the village. He felt his fingernails grow back out to the full-length black claws he used to keep sharpened as a child, to make it easier to climb trees. Then, his jaw shifted a little as his teeth shifted into the conical fangs of a dragon's maw. Your eyes are glowing gold. Alexis gasped. Dominic shrugged. It happens when I use too much mana as well. In fact, it happens to most mages, but usually blue or purple. He drew back his lips to show his teeth and held up his hand to show his claws. Young dragonkin can't fully control their bestial aspects, or understand why they need to hide the parts of themselves that make playing more fun. On the day that Dagos invaded Wavemates, I was out in the forest, playing with the huntsman's dogs and searching for materials my mother needed for her work. The magical resources of the forest are excellent for making magical items, you see. Because of that, I didn't hear the soldiers coming. I didn't even notice when the huntsmen called their dogs back. I was too busy with my tasks for the day. So, I will start the story with the moment that I got back to the village. Dominic took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't going to be easy, and he had locked away most of these memories long ago. Chapter 183. When Wavemates Fell. Dominic was lost in memories of the worst day of his life for a long moment, then continued. The first thing that I saw was the smoke. So much smoke. Then the Dagos' uniforms coming out of a burning house. They were throwing the bodies in the street as they cleared the village. They weren't even sparing the children. The next thing that I remember, I was on a Dagos soldier. Dragon claws tear through flesh like tearing soft bread. You see. He wasn't shocked. Even at the last moment, there was nothing but hate in his eyes. I took his short sword and chased another soldier into a house. I used to idolize the manor guards. I watched them every afternoon during training and memorized their sword drills, practicing with a stick for a blade. Half the village kids did. Dominic realized that he was delaying and focused on the story. The sounds of burning houses and soldiers looting drowned out any sound that soft leather boots made on the floor, and the second man never even saw me coming. I don't know why, but I tore his throat out with my claws. I never did use that sword. I've still got it, and it's never been used since. When I came out, someone had found the first body, and the soldiers were gathered in the town square. They saw me right away, but they were standing in a defensive circle. I screamed at them, and it turned into a gout of dragon fire. The first time I ever used the ability in my life. An entire unit died there. After that, I hunted through the woodsmen's houses and the small farms around town, and found dozens more soldiers, but no survivors. My house was empty, and I took the few valuables that we had. I couldn't let the soldiers have it, and my parents weren't there. I found their bodies at my uncle's manor, along with the manor guards and all the extended family. The Dagos invaders had dragged them into the yard, tied them to poles, and burned the women to death. Someone must have stopped them because the fires had been put out, and the last few died to swords. There were so many bodies there. 1,000 more? I don't know. I never counted them. More soldiers showed up while I was checking the manor for survivors, and they began looting the bodies. Something in me snapped, seeing them being so callous to the dead, and I don't remember the next part, just that I bit someone's hand off with the most beautiful ruby bracelet held in it. I've got that too. It's a bit damaged, but I'm saving it for the day that I find a relative of the Earl's wife. Dominic stopped to take a drink and wet his mouth, while the princess and the soldiers shared horrified looks. How old would you have been then? I was still doing basic education with Governess Camilla when Wavemates fell. Alexis asked, her eyes wet with tears. Dominic counted back. I turned 10 just before the attack. A bit small for 10 years old, but dragonkin are like that. We mature slowly and live long lives. Or, so my mother used to say. But I don't remember anything after biting that soldier's hand. I am certain that days passed before my mind was clear again. But the next thing that I remember, it was dawn, and I was sleeping in the forest, covered in blood and surrounded by a mountain of soldiers' bodies. Berserk. One of the soldiers whispered. The others nodded, and Princess Alexis frowned. Do you know exactly how long after the attack that was? She asked, treating him with the cautious care that one would give a wounded animal. Dominic smiled at her, trying to assure the princess that he had come to terms with the past. Not more than 2 or 3 days. There were still more Dago soldiers moving through the area or sitting in villages waiting for orders. Once I realized there was nothing left to go back to, I went to my home and loaded what I could into my storage cube. The soldiers destroyed all the magitech in the village when they attacked. I'm not sure why. Even now, Dagos needs it. After that, I went west into Axbridge. It's 700 kilometers west down the river, and then through the jungle. Every soldier I saw, I killed. As long as they were in a unit smaller than 10. If they were in a larger unit, I avoided them. Unless they were sleeping in a house that I could burn down with them in it. I had always assumed that was the reason that Dagos called me a war criminal. For all of their despicable tactics, they still get upset when someone targets their camps in the night. The regiment's head cook stopped Dominic there. Wait, you're saying that at 10 years old, you crossed an entire country, killing an unknown number of Dago soldiers while they slept, and managed to make it out of the country? Why didn't you just come south? You were already at the Signia border. He asked. Signia was an ally of Dagos until the start of this war. Officially, they didn't accept any refugees, and they would have turned me over to Dagos if I was caught. Over time, they stopped enforcing the policy, and by the time I came back last year, nobody cared anymore. Dominic replied with a shrug, then muttered under his breath. It's not an unknown number. It's 1,870 asleep, 304 awake. At least, the ones that I remember. Though it was a bare whisper, the camp was so quiet that those sitting around him heard it anyhow. The soldiers of Dagos were not wrong to fear feral dragonkin. Dominic alone probably had a higher kill count than most military regiments had before the war started. The head cook chuckled. Well, at least we know that their accusations aren't slandering you. They're just the complaints of the winners of a Pyrrhic victory. But it does explain how you went from minor royal to apprentice of a toolsmith in the commoner district. Nobody would have thought to look for you there. Dominic chuckled. And now I think that I've terrified my fiancé. Well, we've got time for me to rebuild my reputation and public image. None of the other young noblemen here are going to try to steal her heart away. At least not after learning that Dominic really was the sort of man who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats or even stack bodies to send a message. The whole camp seemed to freeze in time, waiting for Princess Alexis to respond to Dominic's public claim. But Alexis was just smirking at him. You really do need a makeover. Your character lore doesn't match your fashion sense. She finally replied. Dominic laughed. I've got some gold chains and I have a forge to make a scimitar. Perhaps someone can dig up a tricorn hat. The princess giggled. While the reformed pirate-turned-scoundrel prince is a good storyline, I still don't think it quite matches. Too naval for someone from a landlocked country. Chapter 184. Merchant Caravan. That broke the tension in the camp, and the unit's leaders on this side of the gorge spread back out to check on their teams. None of them were actually expecting trouble, so when a convoy of 4 Magitech trucks pulling trailers and flying the West Kyrian naval standard crossed the river just before dark, everyone was shocked. Roll out a ladder. I will go down and stop them to see if it really is an international merchant. Dominic insisted. And if they are? The soldier with the ladder asked. Then that depends on their answers. We're not at war with West Kyria, but if they're moving military supplies, they're not leaving with them. Dominic replied. Dominic stepped into the road just in time for the first truck in the convoy to apply the brakes.
If they had wanted to.
They weren't idiots, and they knew that this was most likely an ambush. So, when they hit the area barrier that Dominic had raised, they were still doing close to 30 kilometers an hour, and the occupants of the first truck were tossed up against the windshield. Son of a bitch. That hurt. What the hell did we hit? The driver demanded. Magical barrier. Welcome to the Skiptondal River crossing. My band of merry men is looking for a particular war criminal and his associates. You wouldn't be harboring or supplying them, would you? Dominic asked as the other trucks came to a screeching halt. Steam hissed as pressure valves were released to stop the trucks further back down the line, and shouts of alarm were raised as the mortar teams appeared along the ridge lines. The driver of the first truck held a cloth to his head, slowing the bleeding, and glared at Dominic, who signaled at him in the Trade Guild's hand language, which was the same as the Wavemates' military signals. We're looking for Prince Kaizan and his military leaders. We won't let military supplies pass. The driver blinked slowly, then gestured back. We have a guild transit pass. Dominic shrugged. Don't care. If he's here, he dies. No war supplies go east of the river until he is dead. We're moving textiles from Skipple to Chip. The driver replied. That meant they had to cross Dagos and West Kyria, or go by sea, as Chip was northeast of West Kyria, along the shore. However, if they had set out from Skipple on this route, they had most likely left weeks ago, and at the time, there was no war within Dagos' borders. Only the invasion of Signia. Dominic nodded. Open the doors. I am checking for compliance with the pass. No offense intended, but we've dealt with enough traitors lately. Dominic insisted, loud enough for his men and the other drivers to hear him. The drivers' responses were mostly annoyed, but the presence of the mortar teams told them that Dominic wasn't asking. One cargo box at a time, Dominic checked the supplies and found that the merchants were honest about their cargo. There wasn't a single weapon, military uniform, or a bit of magitech anywhere to be found. He even sniffed for hidden magic in the vehicles. But, unless the contraband goods were hidden next to the steam boiler furnace, there was no more magic on the vehicles either. Go ahead. The vehicles are clean, Dominic announced, raising his voice, so the regiment could hear him. Then he signaled to the driver closest to him. Everything east of here is either under siege or under the control of the Signia army. Best of luck making your destination. You might want to go the long way. The driver passed the message to the front of the convoy, and they made their way up out of the canyon. Brilliant plan, sir. The military convoy in the distance just watched them leave the valley, and they're headed our way now. The scouts reported when Dominic got back up the cliff. Convoy? Surely, not the Viscount again. Dominic asked. The scout shook his head.
No, sir.
They are newly arrived. A full regiment. A proper infantry regiment, that is, close to 5,000 men. Dominic sighed. I believe that the princess will agree that if they're dumb enough to try to push across the bridge, we can deal with them in the canyon. They must know that we're here now, as we stopped the merchants. So, they're going to come across at full battle readiness. Try not to blow the bridge, if possible. But there's no need to let them engage our men, just to let the bridge survive. Once the canyon was clear, the unit began moving forward in lockstep, a perfect military march leading with infantry and the supply vehicles at the rear of the convoy. When they reached the bridge, Dominic extended an area barrier over the gap between the cliff faces, intended to block archers from firing up into the mortar teams. But the soldiers didn't stop, and Dominic began to have real concerns about their mental health. In fact, They marched all the way into the canyon, then sounded a whistle and turned to face both sides of the ambush. Deploy anti-magic shell. The commander shouted through a bullhorn. Morons. Dominic muttered. Mortars. Fire. Explosions rocked the canyon and extended down the road the last 50 meters to the bridge, where the first of the supply trucks was parked, waiting for what they thought would be a slaughter to end. Technically, they weren't wrong. It was a slaughter. But mortars weren't a magical device. At least, not once the ammunition was created. An anti-magic zone would have no effect on them. Princess Alexis shook her head in dismay and looked down at the aftermath of the massacre. 3 volleys. That was all it had taken. They could have probably stopped after 2 and finished with rifles if there were any survivors. Why don't they learn? She pleaded with nobody in particular, disgusted by the waste of life. Dominic wrapped an arm around her shoulder, and the regimental quartermaster gave a rueful sigh before speaking. Did you see their determination? They knew that the war was lost already. They didn't come here to win. They came here to redeem themselves or die with dignity. Princess Alexis frowned at the young nobleman.
She had never thought of it that way.
They didn't know what was happening to the west of them, only what they had seen to the east. If things were just as bad in the rest of the nation, it wouldn't be any surprise if the soldiers saw their only options as victory or death. The peasantry of this portion of Dagos had mostly died before the war even started. Chapter 185. Clear the battlefield. The soldiers went about the grim task of cleaning the battlefield and found that the supply trucks they had sent were completely empty, save for a few weeks' worth of military-issue rations. This unit had not brought anything with them. Not tents, not a camp kitchen. Nothing. So, the vehicles were loaded with bodies, and then the natural sons pulled them off the road and into a clearing where they could have firewood stacked around them to make a proper funeral pyre for the casualties of the battles in the gorge. The fires burned bright all night long, while Dominic restocked the munitions for the mortar teams. 10 more for everyone. That was what he could do in the course of an evening before it got too dark, Dominic discovered. It was a lot of mortars, even when he was making them a bundle at a time, the way that cannonballs were made. He still wouldn't say that all of the soldiers were amply supplied. But they should have had a few left from the previous round of supplies to go with the new batch. The next morning brought silence to the camp. The fires burned low, and no more convoys were spotted along the road. Either Dagos had given up on reinforcing their troops to the east, or they had been sent to the next bridge south, avoiding the ambush location. It gave them all time to rest, clean their gear, get proper meals, and mentally prepare themselves for whatever was going to happen next. Then, the situation changed. Incoming military unit from east. It appears to be one of ours. Scouts have spotted airships. The runner informed Dominic and Alexis as they were finishing dinner. Send a runner to make contact. If they are our soldiers, I don't want any misunderstandings. We don't have a functional radio with us to contact the airships. Princess Alexis ordered. That was a minor oversight on their part. They had left in a hurry and hadn't thought to get a portable one for the regiment. There were receivers in the trucks, but not transmitters. Again, an oversight of design, and one that both Dominic and the princess would recommend be remedied the moment that they returned home after the war. The runner returned after nearly 2 hours and came with an officer of the 2nd Regiment, Prince Alex's assigned soldiers. Is the 9th princess here and safe? The man anxiously demanded as he was led into the camp. Who is asking about the 9th princess? Dominic demanded.
Oh.
Lord Sorcerer. Wonderful. I wasn't sure if you really had come with the regiment, or if the princess was still in hiding somewhere. The 2nd prince sends his best wishes, and a letter. This one is for you. I have one for Her Highness as well, if she is with you. The messenger explained. Princess Alexis came out from inside the truck and smiled at the messenger. Relax, this is Thomas, one of my 2nd brother's personal servants. They've been together for their entire lives. She explained. The man bowed to her, then smirked. You look interesting with dark hair, Your Highness. Your 2nd brother will be here momentarily, and I suspect that he won't object to staying overnight before moving on. Alexis nodded. It's been too long. How goes the war in the east? The east and the south have fallen to the might of Signia's armies. All of the former Wavemates territories, all the way to Kainwen, have been captured. Eastern Dagos is now under our control, and the First Prince has led 100 airships to the north to take Modbury. We received a communication from Viscount Boscombe that was most concerning and chose to take a force to verify its authenticity. Thomas explained. In short, well over half of Dagos was now in enemy hands. If the Viscount Boscombe had not managed to secure the throne by now, it was too late. The First Prince would be on his doorstep in a matter of days, with an army supported by airships and a Dagos princess as his wife to secure his own claim to the throne. The regiment led the second prince to the south side of the canyon, while his soldiers blocked the eastern hill. Give the order for the regiment to gather on this side of the road. There is no more need for us to be separated. We will be behind the lines as of tomorrow morning, Dominic instructed. Prince Alex got down from a mechanical horse and pulled his sister into a hug. It's good to see you again, little sister. I thought that things were going to turn out badly there for a few days. Bring your betrothed, and we will discuss this in your command center, he insisted. Princess Alexis led the way to the tent, and a pair of the prince's officers followed them in. Have you had a chance to read the letters yet? Prince Alex asked. Alexis shook her head. Not yet. You got here just after we finished questioning Thomas about current events. I take it this is something important. The prince nodded grimly. You could say that. Viscount Boscombe has invited us to his coronation and implied that he had an arrangement with you about ending the war if he managed it. However, Prince Kaizan sent a very similar letter informing us that the Viscount was in poor health and would be abdicating his candidacy for the throne. We will be headed for Albrol City under the guise of a diplomatic envoy, but I don't expect that the transition is going to go as smoothly as I had hoped. Dominic chuckled softly. So, Boscombe is a man of his word, and Kaizan is open about his intent to kill the Viscount now that his armies have lost and his political influence is waning? Does that about sum it up? The prince winked at him. On the surface, yes. Under that, there are hundreds of major and minor nobles, all with their own estates, interests, and alliances. The Crown Prince has a number of the more influential ones from the southeastern regions aboard an airship with him at the moment, in case things devolve to the point where it is more advantageous for him to take over Dagos and abdicate Signia to me. I wouldn't put it past him to want to keep them both, but it's no secret that such a plan would never be acceptable to any of the neighboring nations. Chapter 186. Drag back in. Dominic served a round of drinks after purifying them and sat down on the advisor's chair along the wall as Princess Alexis launched into an annoyed tirade. So, we get to watch the political theater in Dagos play out, while trying not to get too deeply involved, but also not so uninvolved that our allies feel that we've left them hanging in the wind. Lovely, she declared. The prince shrugged. I don't see why you're so upset about it. This comes with the position. We sit around, listen to nobles whine, make sure that things go our way, and then leave. It's the same everywhere that we go. The only difference is that this time we're in Dagos and not some disgruntled border baron's estate. Coincidentally, we're running low on those. Too many of the border barons were swayed by either coin or promised reforms under the Dagos monarchy that would have made them virtual tyrants on their own land. The sort of thing that we did away with centuries ago. I shouldn't be surprised, I suppose. There were always nobles who complained about the limits put on their power. We just didn't see the betrayal coming. Alexis rolled her eyes at the comment. Some of them had seen it coming. The moment that the Dagos prince started to promise them unlimited rights to abuse the peasantry, it was inevitable that many of them would turn. She was well aware of just how despicable many of them were. There were still some suitable options, though. Well, once we get this all sorted, I have an entire regiment full of loyal nobles in need of titles and lands. She suggested. Well, we can discuss that after the war is properly over. I will have my men set up for the evening. Where is your tent set? Prince Alex asked. Alexis gestured to the truck, and the prince frowned. You didn't set a tent? I suppose that's reasonable if you're in hiding. Speaking of which, I don't see your ladies in waiting. The princess smirked at him. I didn't bring them. A little taste of how the other side lives, with no domestic staff and no devoted servants to stroke their ego. Well, maybe just not as many. I've still got Dominic. The second prince chuckled. You know that Claudius is going to be furious, right? Not just a little upset, but properly furious. I hope that you thought this through. The princess nodded. I did. And I suspect that there will be more consequences than simply father's anger that I didn't marry into wealth. It may have only been Daegos involved in the attack, but I don't recall any of the other royals being too upset at the apparent end of the Dragon King's lineage. Bringing a Wavemates prince back into royal life is going to ruffle more than a few feathers. The prince nodded, his pale eyes sparkling with amusement. And it doesn't matter if he tries to calm them or if he loses his temper. There is no way to win. Either they will accuse him of bewitching them, or of having gone feral. Dominic chuckled, and Prince Alex simply shrugged. The Dragonkin gunsmith might be popular in the Signia Palace, but that didn't mean anything to strangers and foreign royals. I am more concerned about how the Daegos nobility will react when they see me in Albrols. The last time that I checked, they still consider me a war criminal. Dominic reminded them. The two royals frowned. That could be an issue. But perhaps the Viscount will see sense. I suppose that we could disguise you, but I suspect that he already knows who you are. If you just keep a hat on, it should be fine for the first round of meetings. Alexis suggested. Prince Alex shrugged. I say that we put him up front with his hair slicked back, so nobody misses the horns and a dragon core in his hand. Like a living tactical weapon in waiting. Level 200 Berserk Dragonkin in the throne room. I like it. Solid intimidation tactic. Alexis laughed. Dominic sighed. I really do need to put more work into leveling my spells. If I'm supposed to be the one doing the dirty work in the background, I should really have the skills to actually do it. Prince Alex nodded. I have advantages as a battle mage, since I can make mana cores to imbue spell gems with power, though they take too long to make to be efficient. But if you can't get to level 10 on at least 1 or 2 combat skills, it will be difficult for you in the future. Dominic nodded. I've got spells at level 8 now, so not too much further to go. I'm just short on monster cores. Well, sort of. I've got some, but I'm going to need them soon for spending money. Understandable. If you're going to ask for a princess and a peerage, you will need as much money as you can get. Alex joked. Well, it's unlikely we will get actual war reparations, so I'll have to figure something out. Maybe I should ask for a rural peerage so we can go out and hunt monsters with the manor guards. Dominic replied. Alexis laughed, but the prince nodded in agreement. It might be the only way to keep her happy. A stocked library and plenty of monsters to hunt. Perhaps somewhere north of Westfield? That area is very rural, and there are plenty of monsters of all sorts, but good fields. Assuming you can keep the farmers alive to work them. Dominic shrugged. I'm sure that we can arm and train a guard detachment relatively easily. That's one part of the noble skill set that we are certainly not lacking in. Prince Alex smiled at his sister, then nodded in agreement with Dominic. Good point. Frontier monster hunting might just be exactly the sort of life for you too. I just hope that you don't steal too many of the paladins when you go. Chapter 187. Self-Help Books. Prince Alex took a book from his storage ring and handed it to Dominic. I'm not sure if you can learn this, but if you can, it might really speed up your progress. It's the art of making mana crystals. Normally, only mages make them, but it's possible that sorcerers do too if they know the technique. Our father is much more relaxed about non-humans than his father was, but there is still a lot that is kept secret about Dragonkin magic because the Wavemates kings didn't trust others not to use it against them. You should be able to make a crystal up to your current innate level, but I don't know how that will work for you, as you're not a mage. For me, my innate level is 5. The level that I can increase new spell gems to based on the level of my battle mage core. But that takes too much work for most people, so they just stop when they get a level 1 or 2 crystal and call it good. To get a newly attuned gem to the peak of level 1, it takes about 5 levels of mana cores. That increases with every level of the spell gem or trade skill core. It's not static for everyone. The higher your affinity, the lower the increase. But in general, the most proficient are around a 50% increase with every level. The least compatible users need around double the mana per level. That will vary with every spell and Magitech device that you get. Some Magitech devices take inordinately high amounts of materials to increase, but that is usually because they have an exceptional effect, or a combination of multiple different effects built into them, which don't perfectly align with each other. Now, at first, it's not bad. Even if you needed 10 levels to reach the peak of level 1, most mages will need around 60 to get to level 5. That's a reasonable number that most common guards and workers can expect to reach. But you'll need nearly 1,000 to get to the start of level 9, 4,000 to get to level 11, and nearly 1,000,000 to get to level 20. So, very few make it past level 10. The cost in both time and mana to get past that point is simply too high. The more that you use a spell, the more affinity that you get to it, and that is why you will eventually level up a spell gem with time. It's not as much a matter of use giving it more energy, but of attunement improving and the stored energy you have already given it becoming more effective. Use the mana stone creation technique, then practice your spells constantly, and you should get a few of them from level 8 to 10 easily enough, assuming that your compatibility was mediocre. If it was already good, it will be harder to gain with practice, but easier to grow with the mana crystals. If you can master that skill, then I will give you a book on materia gem creation, and you can pass on your magical skills with new spell gems. That's the real moneymaker, no matter what the Magitech engineers say. Princess Alexis chuckled as her brother finished getting sidetracked with excitement about someone new learning the arts of the mage lords. What he hadn't told Dominic was that the skill he was giving him instructions for was not one that all mages could use. Only those with exceptional talent or years of practice could master it. But Dominic's eyes lit up as he read the book, and within seconds, he was forming a tiny crystal in his hand. When it got to the size of a chicken egg, it would be at level 1. But at the rate Dominic was going, that would take hours. Still, he appeared to have needed mere seconds to master the technique that took most mages a decade to learn. That's just cheating. I spent 3 weeks learning that skill, and he gets it just by reading the instructions once. Actually, I don't even think he finished the instructions. He definitely didn't get into the explanatory chapters. Prince Alex muttered. Dominic's crystal was growing rapidly as mana flowed from all around him, turning it to an egg-sized level 1 mana crystal in only a few minutes. Oh, I like it. That's a good skill. Thank you. Your aptitude for that is simply ridiculous. If you keep it up, there is no reason that you shouldn't be able to increase your primary skills to the level of a master before you're 30. Prince Alex commended him. Are you not at level 40 on your primary gem already? You can't be 30 yet.
Dominic asked.
The prince chuckled and shook his head. I had a fortunate encounter, you could say. I have exceptional affinity for my chosen gem, that is true. But I managed to obtain an ancient artifact that caused rapid growth. That's how I got so far ahead at my age. Dominic nodded in understanding. Oh, that makes more sense. I thought that there was some secret skill hack that was kept from the public so that we didn't have superhumans running around causing chaos. The prince blinked once, slowly, then stared at Dominic. What? Superhumans running around causing chaos? What exactly do you think Dragonkin and the other monster-blooded sorcerers are? Given another few decades, you'll have the strength to throw a grown man through walls and the innate magic to raise cities. Half of the Dago's noblemen are going to be utterly terrified of your presence, and the other half will demand that anything involving your presence be done with an anti-magic barrier up. I would also be sure to keep a barrier up on your room, because after thousands of attempts, the only way that they found to kill the Dragon King was to transform an assassin to look like one of his consorts and kill him in his sleep. Awake, they couldn't manage it. Prince Alex reminded him. I had always wondered how they managed that. If the Dragon King was supposed to be so terrifying, it didn't make sense that the nation fell so fast. Dominic agreed. Nobody really knows the truth, I suppose. The assassinated in his sleep theory is just a rumor that Dago spread because there were no survivors of the events at the palace. Nobody but the Dago's king, and perhaps his advisors, truly knows what happened that day. Dominic sighed. And they're mostly dead or 100 years old now. Chapter 188. Leave at first light. We should sleep early, so that we can get moving at first light. The road is good, but it is a long way to Albrol City. Prince Alex insisted, changing the topic. Then we will see you in the morning. Alexis replied, before she gave him a hug and dragged Dominic back to the truck to help her get ready for bed. Alex, shook his head as he watched them leave. Of all of his brothers and sisters, he had never seen one of them so eager to get married and start living a domestic life. Well, to begin living whatever twisted version of domesticity they had come up with between them. Most of his siblings' spouses hardly tolerated each other for the first few months until they got used to each other's presence. He had at least known his wife before they were betrothed, but none of the royals had married a childhood friend or frequent acquaintance in this generation. That was deliberately done so that the attempts to embed lovers into the lives of the royals didn't give any of the upper nobles a leg up. But he knew that there were a few playboys and amenable ladies who had been recommended by other siblings as a marriage match. So, it wasn't a total failure. For a moment, he considered saying something. But the entire regiment was used to their arrangement at this point, so there wasn't much he could do now except hurry the wedding along when the war was over. Before dawn, Dominic was awake, setting up a shower tent with a campfire under the water tank so that the princess could get a properly warm shower before they headed to the city. After an extended deployment, it took at least 2 showers to get yourself smelling pleasant again, so starting this morning would save time on evening preparations after they arrived in Albrolls. Assuming that it didn't immediately turn into a battle, that was. Dominic helped the princess into a fancier dress after breakfast, and the convoy set out west down the highway. The first few hours were quiet, with nothing moving in their scouting range. Only after they had stopped for lunch did the convoy first encounter anyone, and that was a Dago's army unit headed the same direction that they were. The scouts returned to the regiment, and the flags of a diplomatic envoy were raised. Everyone had their weapons ready, unsure how the Dago's army would respond. The Signia force pulled up beside the Dago soldiers, who moved off the road, and sent an officer to greet them. "Commander, might we ask which envoy you are representing?" The officer asked as Commander Dax stopped in front of him. "The second prince of Signia, Prince Alex. His honor guard is escorting him to Albrolls for the coronation event in 3 days." Dax replied, while trying not to make it obvious that his hand was resting next to his revolver. "I see. Which coronation are you to attend?" the officer asked. "We received messages from both Viscount Boscom and Prince Kaizan. We are eager to see how the situation plays out." Dax replied, "We will accompany you to the new capital. For your safety." The officer insisted after a moment of thought. "Certainly. Lead the way. We will follow your pace, as we have no infantry." Commander Dax agreed. The Dago's army didn't have anyone on foot, but their infantry transports were not made for high speeds. There were 4 long benches on a truck bed with a canvas sunshade, and the soldiers were packed tight, with their gear at their feet. It was a rough and uncomfortable ride, with terrible suspension. So, the Signia convoy slowed their speed to match as they rode through the afternoon, and then made camp 2 hours before sunset, when they met with another Dago's army convoy headed for Albrolls. Princess Alexis stayed in the carriage with her brother while Dominic went out to get them dinner and meet with the Dago's leadership. He was in his best sorcerer robes, with a hat on and his hood up, despite the late afternoon heat, so it seemed safe enough to talk for a few minutes and make sure he wasn't a strange face to the soldiers when they arrived at Albrolls. "Sir, how might we help you?" a camp guard asked as Dominic approached the edge of the Signia camp. "I just came to make introductions. I am Royal Advisor Dominic. If your officers have any requests, they can come to me instead of the unit officers. More efficient that way. However, I do notice that your unit is serving beans and rice for dinner, and I have a peace offering of sorts." Dominic took out one of the cured hams, formerly from a Dago's military supply shipment, but stripped of its packaging. "Split it among your men. Who knows when they'll get another shipment?" he offered. "Thank you, Advisor. You didn't hear this from me, but lately, only certain units have been getting properly supplied, and a suspicious number of them have gone missing afterward, along with the soldiers carrying the supplies." The officer whispered. Dominic nodded, then turned to return to his camp. Some things couldn't be said too loudly, but the officer had confirmed that the desertion rates and lack of supplies were becoming an issue for Dagos. Dominic joined the Signia soldiers at the cook fire as the officer subtly cut the ham in half and sent half to the other unit camped near them. The rest was mixed with the rice and beans, and the camp settled in for a tense night. There was no trust between Dagos and Signia, But curiously, there wasn't much more between the Dago's regiments. They're not sure which candidate for king the other officers support, Commander Dax whispered as Dominic prepared plates for the royal siblings. The Viscount said that most of the army supported Prince Kaizen. Could that be why some units haven't been getting supplies? They weren't loyal enough to the prince, so his cronies cut their support. Dominic asked. That's our theory. We can't prove it yet, but it is the most likely case. Dax agreed. So, we might not be walking into a succession battle, but day one of a civil war. Dominic realized. And we may be the deciding factor in who gets support for the throne, as Signia's armies are overrunning the nation. Dax added ruefully, I hope you brought more rum. Chapter 189. Crowded Airspace. The next morning, all 3 units packed up and began heading for Albrols. They were far from alone. Not even the sky was empty. The second prince's airship escort had gone on ahead of them, scouting for the regiment, in case there were ambushes. But there were foreign airships coming in as well. West Kyria, Bostoveria, Chip, and a half-dozen others had emblazoned their royal colors on the envelope of their airships and sent them here for the coronation. Most of them would only contain a ranking dignitary, such as the second prince, who would be officially representing Signia. But still, it was an impressive showing. The aggression and desperation of Dagos hadn't gone unnoticed, and everyone was becoming concerned that if Signia didn't fall, then their smaller northern neighbors might be the next targets of Dagos' armies. And if Signia did fall, they were certain that they would be, just not as soon. It took time to consolidate a conquest, after all. More than that, they wondered if a new king might put an end to the war and sign a peace treaty between the nations that would stave off future aggressions for another generation. The outskirts of Albrols came into sight, and Dominic realized that the war's progress was much faster than he had believed. Tens of thousands of Signia soldiers from the 3rd and 5th armies were gathered around the city, and the radio transmitter was broadcasting news of a temporary ceasefire, with the airships to their north halting their attack on Modbury and Bamberbury, pending the result of the coronation. Those were some of the largest cities in the nation, and if they were being besieged from above and by the Crown Prince's First Army, then it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Dagos was nearly finished. As they approached the city, the Dagos forces fell into a protective formation around the Signia regiments, providing an escort for them right to the edge of the 3rd Army's camp. Advisor, please inform His Highness that arrangements have been made for your forces to camp here. His Highness and any nobleman among your regiment may request rooms at the palace, should you wish to remain within the city. The Dagos commander informed Dominic through the window of the truck. That made the soldiers laugh, and the man gave them a confused look. This is the Natural Sons Regiment, Commander. They are all noblemen. Every single one of the cavalry is the son of a titled nobleman. I don't believe that it will be necessary to bring them all to the palace, though. If you allow the prince time to get his men settled here, I will relay the number of Royal Honor Guard who will accompany us into the city. Dominic agreed after Prince Alex motioned for him to take care of the problem. The Dagos commander retreated to his own unit to wait, and Dominic turned to the prince. So, how are we going to do this? Surprise them with the princess? Ride in openly? Put on a show of force? Dominic asked. We will reveal the princess once we're in the palace compound. I don't want to give Prince Kaizen any extra time to plot against her before the real show starts. Prince Alex decided. Do I get a say in this? Alexis asked. Of course. If you want to do it a different way, we can. But with both Dominic and myself in the group, we're already going to grab some attention. I think that letting them find out at the last minute that the bride the bastard prince demanded is here in the palace should throw them into chaos. When he put it that way, Dominic couldn't help but laugh. The nobles of Dagos hated him with a passion, but the second prince had assassinated their king. Surely, they had realized it by now, with Signia informing the world that the incident was a duel, despite the king's advanced age. How many men should we bring? Dominic asked. None. The 2 royals replied at the same time. Dominic frowned. Is that wise? Alexis shrugged, and Alex smirked. Maybe not, but they don't have anyone who can take me in a fight, and I have prepared wards for our rooms. The smaller we make them, the stronger they will be. Showing up with just 2 royals and an advisor when our armies are camped all around the city is a properly provocative show of power, don't you think? Dominic sighed. All right. Should I tell the commander that we're ready as soon as Commander Dax starts to set camp? Please do. This will be fun. I can feel it already. Princess Alexis replied. Dominic exited the truck and passed out the orders to set camp wherever they thought was best, then went for the hard part, explaining to Commander Dax and the other leaders that they would be going without any royal guards or honor guard. I know that. Look, it means I'm not going to like what you have to say. Are we setting up for a siege? We're a bit short on ammunition for that. Commander Dax greeted him. Not yet. Hopefully not at all. His Highness, the second prince, has decided that only the 2 royals plus myself will be entering the city as the delegation. I would say plus the 2 drivers for the truck, but that's not set in stone. They might want to go by mechanical horse. Dominic whispered. Commander Dax frowned. If that's how it is, I will ensure that the team in the truck gets a few extra rounds of mortars. Dominic patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry about that. I will make some and pass them through the window. Just sit tight and be prepared for literally anything to happen. Don't forget that Dagos knows the second prince killed their king. Holy hell, I forgot about that. Well, I suppose it's better that you don't bring the whole regiment when you put it that way. They might mistake it as a demand for surrender. Dax muttered. Chapter 190. Entering Albrol's. Dominic watched as the drivers swapped out for a pair of riflemen who were gunslingers, skilled in close-range pistol work. Commander, we are ready to go. 2 drivers, plus 3 in the royal retinue, myself included. We won't be bringing any extra guards with us. Dominic informed the Dagos unit's leader. Are you sure about that? The commander asked. The second prince is adamant. Dominic agreed. The soldier shrugged. If he's sure, he's sure. It's not my place to argue with royals. Rest assured, we will get you safely to the palace. Dominic turned to leave and heard the soldier mutter. I'll be damned if I have to find out what that psychopath of a prince does if someone attacks his transport on my watch. Smart man. Once Dominic was back on board, the truck turned to join the escort, and the Signia royal banners were hung from the sides of the passenger compartment. There would be no mistakes about who was inside, only about what exactly their intent was. Dominic kept his word and made another 20 rounds of mortar ammunition for each of the drivers as they traveled, while the prince gave him a bemused smile. Are you expecting them to need that much artillery in the palace, or hoping they'll need that much artillery in the palace? He asked. I'm hoping they don't need any artillery in the palace. But realistically, I fully expect to kill someone in the first hour after we arrive. Dominic explained. Princess Alexis nodded. That would not surprise me. But if someone does challenge you to a duel, I recommend that you choose either magic or unarmed as the mode of combat. Unarmed combat only prohibits any form of external weapon, so you're technically free to roast them with flame breath. Her brother gave a dramatic, very fake, gasp. My dear sister, surely you wouldn't encourage your advisor to take such dishonorable actions on your behalf. Would it be better if he bombarded them with fireballs or fired a mortar at them? She retorted. The prince chuckled. He would pay good money to see the nobleman's reactions if Dominic took out a mortar launcher as his weapon in a duel. They would only be standing 10 paces apart. He wouldn't even be out of the blast radius of his own weapon. The truck entered the city, and Dominic heard the crowds hush as they rolled past. Moments earlier, they were loud and curious about the dignitaries entering the city. But now that they had seen a Signia transport with the royal standard on it, the citizens gathered along the road had fallen silent. The silence of the crowd followed them all the way to the gates of the palace, and Dominic stepped out of the truck to announce the royals, as they didn't bring any staff, presenting the second prince and the 9th princess of Signia. He stated simply, in a voice that carried over the hushed crowd. Normally, a herald would give as many formal titles as they had time for, but Dominic had forgotten to ask before they had reached the city. The simple and direct announcement had the desired effect, though. The crowd exploded with noise as the 2 royals stepped out without an escort or any guards, looking supremely confident and walking arm in arm toward the Viscount Boscombe, who had come to greet them. Dominic moved to stand behind them as they greeted the Viscount, who had a welcoming smile on his face. Good, you made it on time. I was unsure if you would receive our invitation, the Viscount announced. Indeed. We couldn't miss such a monumental occasion. It isn't often that a new king ascends the throne. Prince Alex agreed. From off to Dominic's right, a second welcoming committee approached, led by Prince Kaizen. His eyes looked haunted and hollow, as if he hadn't been sleeping at all lately, and he had lost weight since they had seen him in Signia. But he still carried himself as a prince. Welcome, honored guests from Signia. It is our pleasure to welcome you here for the coronation of our next king. Prince Kaizen greeted them. It will be quite the event, I am sure. Prince Alex replied dryly, while the exhausted Dagos prince leered at Alexis. The two sides of the Dagos delegation were standing apart, leaving a clear 3-meter separation, as if it might turn into a battle at any moment. Future kings, it has been a long campaign. Perhaps we could meet after my lovely sister and her fiancé have had a chance to freshen up? Prince Alex asked. Both of the candidates for the next king of Dagos froze in shock. Fiancé. Prince Kaizen finally stammered.
Yes.
Father has already approved the match, and the wedding will be set for a date that doesn't interfere with international affairs. Prince Alex agreed, while Alexis blushed. Kaizen looked as if he was about to explode, even before Dominic winked at him.
We will see about that.
Before the wedding, plans can change. He snarled, then turned and stormed away. The nobles nearby shook their heads in dismay. The prince was becoming increasingly unhinged as he lost power and influence, but he still had control of most of the military, and few would dare to cross him. Viscount Boscombe cleared his throat. Allow my men to escort you to your suite. There is a formal dinner arranged for this evening, and it will be attended by royals from most of the region. Prince Alex nodded. We will be there. Please arrange one suite for our party, and rooms for our drivers. Of course. This way, please. The staff will show your drivers to their rooms. Tell me, are they nobles or commoners? The Viscount replied, noble sons. But I would recommend not putting them near the maids' quarters. They have been on campaign for some time. Prince Alex replied. A few of the nearby nobles chuckled at his response. It didn't matter whether they were near the maids or not. Most unmarried young soldiers would go looking for a pretty lady as soon as they were left unattended. The fact that they were born of nobility just made them an even greater threat of misbehavior, as they would have some money and perhaps even a portion of the estate to manage. Much more attractive than a penniless commoner drafted into the militia.